Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to this IDC Computacenter VMware webinar on the topic of Simplify Your Cloud Management for Resiliency and Innovation. My name is Carla Arendt, and I head up IDC's Cloud Research for Europe. And I'm joined here today by two esteemed co-hosts or co-speakers. One is Paul Casey, Chief Technology Officer for Platforms and Hybrid IT from Computacenter. Good morning, Paul.
Hi, good morning.
And the other one is Martin Hosken, Worldwide Chief Technologist for VMware. Good morning, Martin.
Good morning, everybody.
Thank you very much for being here with me today. What we're going to do in the next hour or so is that I will give a short introduction on the topic, and then we have identified 3 areas where we will have a conversation amongst the 3 of us, and hopefully will give you a lot of insight and ideas on how you can address this topic of simplifying multi-cloud management. But to get us started, I just wanted to take a step back and just acknowledge that we are all working through the pandemic and the pandemic situation, and have been doing that for almost a year now. And we at IDC have developed a model to help customers understand from an IT perspective how their response to the pandemic is probably going to unfold. And this model has 5 stages. So first, in March, April last year, it was very much around the immediate response to the challenges that the pandemic has brought to us. Organizations were looking towards enabling their workforce to work from home as much as possible or where possible. And then we expect organizations to move into a phase where they are very much focused on cost optimization, because they can see that their revenues are being impacted and they need to respond to that. And that, of course, also has an impact on IT budgets, even though we have seen that IT budgets are not as impacted as revenues are, because IT is generally considered as part of the solution. And within IT, we have really seen that cloud as an operating model, cloud as an architecture, is being appreciated by organizations as really helping them to address many of the challenges that the pandemic has brought to them from an IT perspective. And then the third stage of the model is when organizations start to focus on business resiliency. So how can we optimize all our business processes so that we get as efficiently as possible through this pandemic situation? And then we are already looking at the upturn of the curve. So how can we make targeted investments in order to drive innovation, in order to tap into new revenue streams for our organization, preferably already in the next quarter for many organizations. And then finally, the 5th step is digital transformation, which is not a new topic. We've been talking about it for several years now, but now we have these 4 steps that we need to go through before we can return to full-blown digital transformation. And of course, this is a generic model. The process looks different industry by industry. Some organizations are really accelerating their digital transformation initiatives, while others are trying to put in place a solid platform that helps them to respond to this pandemic, but also potentially unforeseen events in the future. And the key here is really that IT is seen as part of the solution, as part of the foundation for reacting to this pandemic and to putting in place a lot of the solutions that help you as an organization, but also us as citizens or the nation states even to respond to the pandemic. And cloud here being one of the primary technologies that is being put in place. But if we look at where organizations are on this curve in the UK specifically, then our latest survey data from December last year showed that 50% of organizations are actually, or 60% of organizations are still in the first 2 stages. Because it actually is not a trivial task to put in place this agile, flexible, yet resilient and secure infrastructure that is really the foundation for an agile business response to unforeseen circumstances like the pandemic. And so that's why we are seeing there's still a lot of discussions around, what should this platform look like? One thing that has come through is that it is going to look like a cloud, or it is going to be cloud-based. But then, of course, within cloud, there are a lot of opportunities or potential architectures that you could adopt. So that's where organizations are currently evaluating, what is the best cloud mix for us. And then, of course, a huge focus on cost optimization. Because most companies have been impacted negatively on their revenues, and they need to adjust their cost models, and cloud technologies can also potentially help with that. But some organizations, that were already quite far along in their digital journey, they are actually accelerating their digital transformation, because they found that these incubator projects that they had put in place before the pandemic are actually the projects that put them in a very good position throughout the pandemic, and they want to accelerate those. But if we go back to the point that, what is the right architecture or the right cloud mix, then we also asked organizations, where are you going to invest? In terms of cloud, not only cloud, we actually asked about all of the IT technologies, but cloud technologies are particularly resilient in terms of investment, because it's so clear that cloud as a platform, as an architecture, as an operating model really helps organizations to move forward. So we see that 68% of organizations in the UK want to either maintain or increase their spend on private cloud. 64% will either spend at the same level or increase their spending on public cloud, so on infrastructure as a service, also on platform as a service, and 72% of UK organizations plan to either spend the same or more on software as a service solutions. So again, finding the right architecture and understanding some of the potential challenges that could come on your cloud journey and addressing them early on is one of the key decisions to take right now. And yes, you will get a copy of the slides. So we already had the first question, and that reminds me actually to remind you that there is a Q&A panel in this webinar. So please feel free to type in your questions as they come up. We will make sure to answer them as real time as we can. And if we don't get to it throughout the presentation, then we also have reserved time at the end of this webinar to address all your questions. But please feel free to keep them coming along the way. So if we look at, or if we think about, what is the right cloud mix? What should we have a multi-cloud strategy? Should we put in place a hybrid cloud architecture? These are some of the key questions that are currently being discussed and addressed. But I think it's important to take a step back and to really look at what does the cloud or the IT landscape look like end to end. And in May 2020, we did our annual survey where we asked organizations, what are your attitudes towards cloud usage? And we gave them the options from being either exclusively on-premise or taking a balanced approach or being exclusively in the public cloud. And here you can see that actually, even though we've been talking about this journey to cloud for the last 10 years and maybe a little bit more intensively in the last 5 years, we are still actually very much at the beginning of this journey. So if you haven't started yet, don't worry, you're not the only one. But I think it's time to definitely start now, because we have seen a big mindset shift in 2020. And I expect this will turn into action in 2021. So cloud is definitely being discussed within organizations. And but when we look at this landscape, you can also see that only 15% of organizations are entirely on-premise or in a co-location facility, and they have no public cloud at all in their mix. But that leaves 85% of organizations who have some kind of hybrid strategy in place. right? And that, of course, has many benefits because you can keep your data in the on-prem environment if you, for example, are subject to regulatory compliance. But you can also use the flexibility and agility of the public cloud where you need it. So hybrid cloud architectures are preferred at the moment for organizations. And we also see that public cloud services are being brought into the mix more and more. And that already brings me to the first discussion, where I would like to bring Paul and Martin back into the frame. And the first topic that we want to discuss, which comes up a lot in my discussions with customers and also in Paul and Martin's discussions, is what do you need to be aware of to overcome the challenges of running a multi-cloud or hybrid cloud environment? Because when we talk hybrid and multi-cloud, they are great architectures or architectural models, but they also bring a certain level of operational complexity that you need to address. And what we've learned from our annual survey is the biggest challenge actually that customers face is managing and controlling cost. And that has also come back, interestingly, from the pre-event survey that we have been running. So thank you very much for filling that in. But that has also been mentioned by you as the biggest challenge in running multi-cloud environments. So that has not changed. And the reason is that every cloud provider has a slightly different way to make information available around what's driving the cost and what is actually the cost of the different cloud services. And it's quite overwhelming for organizations to get an overview of what they are paying, but also what are the levers that they can pull in order to bring down the cost in the cloud. And then regulatory compliance is number 2. And that has also been confirmed by the pre-event survey, where security was the number 2 challenge in multi-cloud environments. So security and regulatory compliance are often seen as one kind of group of challenges. So that has also been confirmed. And then we have portability of data and workloads is also a challenge. So we are still not at the point where we can just dynamically choose between different clouds. Actually, once the choice for a certain cloud has been made, then oftentimes organizations stay there because it's not trivial to move between different clouds and your private cloud and public cloud. So with that, I would like to ask you, actually, Paul, what are some of the challenges that you've been seeing with your customer base, and how do you help them overcome them?
Yeah, thanks, Carla. Yeah, I go back to 2017. It was November 2017, actually. And I was sat with our group CEO and our UK managing director at an industry roundtable that we had organised to talk to a group of CIOs from global brands about, what was their thinking around multi-cloud? Was it really a problem? Was it something they were embracing? Is it something they were looking forward to? And at that time, I think it was about 15 CIOs, as I said, in the room. One did not really see the benefits of multi-cloud. They were very committed to going down a single path and sort of, moving completely into Azure. Interestingly, that customers has been advised by the regulator not to be so heavily invested just in one public cloud, as for all the good reasons out there that the regulator wants that business to be sustainable and not be down if the hyperscaler goes down. But for the others in the room, they believed multi-cloud was a good thing. They were embracing it. They thought it was a positive. And then the last couple of people that we came to asking the question, they said, look, it doesn't really matter. It's an inevitability. We're going to have to deal with this because of mergers and acquisitions. So whether you ask me if I like it or not, I have to deal with it. I have to get on with it, But, back in 2017, I'm not really sure that everybody saw the challenges that this would be bringing them. They saw the benefits, and they saw the ability to, enable their business areas to leverage best of breed in, from the different cloud providers. So, at that time, and really since that time, we've been thinking about the impact of multi-cloud and the evolution that really our customers would need to go through to be able to effectively manage and sort of deliver a multi-cloud capability. So we've been building IP and engaging customers. The problem didn't take long to start arising where they were starting to deal with the problem. And I would say, a vast majority of our customers are now having to deal with the problem. I looked at your survey results. It talks about everybody's using one or two public clouds. I would say that's absolutely representative of Computacenter's base just now. And that's either driven, as we said, by strategy or consequence. COVID has definitely accelerated it, no doubt about that. We saw a massive uptick in any activity around public cloud and multi-cloud. And I would totally agree that cost is a problem that people are struggling to get a handle on as well. But to go back to answer your question about how to overcome the challenges, I think it's really about what's defining, first of all, defining how multi-cloud is presenting itself in a challenging way to many of these customers, and understand the size and scope of the problem so people know what they're dealing with. So as the visual on the slide here says, the first area is about, we see a little bit of a lack of understanding of the issue and the breadth of the issue. You're really dealing with multiple concurrent technology changes in play. The technology is constantly evolving, and it's evolving across all the different cloud providers. So you've got that to deal with. You've got all the usual stuff of dealing with cloud anyway, about moving from managing discrete resources to pooled resources. Methods of how you manage and do stuff with technology fundamentally is changing as well. Moving from securing the perimeter to identity-based security, and the stakeholders is fundamentally changing as well. Previously there was this sort of distant relationship between IT and its consumer, and now these two sort of worlds are really being thrown together. So fundamentally, you've got people who are still trying to get a handle on one public cloud, and are now having to deal with multiple public clouds together under multi-cloud. So that's the first point, really. And then you look at there's lots of great advice that you will get if you're being led by a hyperscaler about ways of working and how to do cost management and how to do some of these sort of areas. But these are usually quite exclusive to their cloud. And it's down to you to work out how does that sort of manifest given my mix of the providers that make up my multi-cloud. That's something that you need to get the teams really working on. The hyperscaler can't really help you with that because they're focused on their cloud. And then I think it comes down to the limitations in the relationship as well. It says on the slide here, IT and business alignment. We see a lot of IT organizations that are still a little bit distant, and the businesses are becoming more cloud savvy than IT is. We see that quite a lot, actually. So we see a little bit of if IT tries to go build a multi-cloud capability in isolation of what the business is trying to do, what the developer's trying to do, that usually doesn't work very well. That often comes down to lack of sort of developer empathy. So our approach really is you've got to put yourself in the position of the business consumer and design what you're building with that outcome in mind. The business will sort of drive you in a direction given if they get a chance to, and they will take you on a path that is going to be successful so that when you build a multi-cloud capability, it is used. So that really forces you to think about security, data, governance, and all of the things that enable the business to lead and to deliver workloads. So that would be my recommendation: is do not focus on the tools. This is not a tools problem. It's not about consolidated billing. It's about something much bigger than that. And you have to really center it around a single cloud organization, not allow different cloud organizations to develop to support the different clouds.
Yeah, thank you very much, Paul. I think you raise some very interesting points, especially also about the organizational change, because cloud definitely is not just a technology, but it is very much also an organizational transformation journey, because organizations really need to change the way that they organize, like you said, and we see cloud centers of excellence, for example, emerging in the most forward-looking organizations, but they also need to change their budgeting process, for example, to align them to this new cloud-based consumption model. So I think it's actually a proper organizational transformation and not just a technology journey. And another comment I just wanted to make is also based on the pre-event survey results, what I found really interesting is that the reasons for using multi-cloud, and you alluded to them as well, Paul, that came back from the survey were resiliency and business continuity. I think that's very much pandemic related. But then also the other one was employee satisfaction, right? And that I found quite interesting, and it actually reflects back to the point that you raised, that the cloud strategy needs to support the business strategy. And one of the big benefits that you can get from a multi-cloud approach is that you can actually cater to the different preferences of your developers, for example, or your IT organization. So I found that very interesting. Thank you very much, Paul. Martin, I would like to also get your view on what are some of the challenges that you see in your customer base as they are trying to conquer the cloud, and how you help them address those challenges.
Yeah, thanks, Carla. Just last week, I was talking to one of the major UK banks around this very subject, and they were telling me that their regulator would not allow them to go live in a single public cloud with one of their critical applications. Their critical applications have to be deployed in multiple public clouds. So multi-cloud is absolutely an inevitability for many organizations. That's, I think, the first clear statement. But we do see different patterns when it comes to multi-cloud, different ways that organizations are consuming multiple clouds. Of course, there's the obvious way where you build an application in Azure or AWS or in Google Cloud, and it runs in a contained manner within that public cloud. But then you also see organizations building more complicated applications across different public clouds. For example, you might be leveraging Google's Vision API, but the images themselves live in an AWS S3 bucket. So then connectivity and latency becomes an issue. But at VMware, we're aiming to be able to cover all of these different use cases. And we're able to cover them in a whole range of different ways. And I think there's two different paths we're following here from a VMware perspective. First of all, there's the concept of putting VMware on public cloud. And you mentioned earlier on in your introduction about how difficult it is to move workloads from one public cloud to another public cloud or back on premise. VMware, by having a consistent VMware platform across every single public cloud, which is now what we actually have, that becomes a reality. Being able to live migrate workloads from Azure to AWS or AWS to Google Cloud is a reality for customers who are running a VMware platform on each of those public clouds. And we have partnered with AWS initially 4 years ago, more recently in the last 18 months or so, Microsoft to come to market with Azure VMware Solutions, Google Cloud VMware Engine has come to market, Oracle Cloud VMware Solution has come to market, Ali Cloud VMware Solution, but that's specific to mainland China and Hong Kong at the moment. So that ability to have that flexibility and that control of your workloads, the consistent security platform across all of those different public clouds is appealing to customers. But at the same time, you can leverage those great services. So if you want to be able to leverage Google Vision APIs, or you want to be able to leverage AWS S3 or Kinesis, you have direct access into those services. So you can extend use cases of your applications from your VMware platform and add new use cases, maybe mobile capabilities. You talked about the pandemic and how people are working and changing the way they work. Maybe adding, a mobile front end to an application in public cloud, but the back end of that application still runs on a VMware estate, which gives you that better control, better security, and portability of those workloads. So there is choice out there. There's a whole range of choice out there. Another approach VMware is also, very, very critically taking, I guess, is this whole management and operation element. So we have tools that are able to sit across public cloud, private cloud, VMware on public cloud, giving you those single pane of glass. If there is such a thing as a single pane of glass, I'm not sure there is, but giving you that holistic view of your entire estate. Applications running on EC2, applications running on-prem on a VMware platform, running in public cloud on a VMware platform. And the next stage of that as well is the whole Tanzu portfolio element, where we're building an application platform that can run in your data center, in public cloud, or on VMware in public cloud. So again, you can have a consistent application experience, or your developers can have a consistent application development experience, no matter where the cloud endpoint resides.
Right. And what I like about this view is also that you can use the same skill sets, right? You probably already have a lot of capabilities in-house, but now you can extend them into the public cloud.
Absolutely. Running VMware on public cloud is almost identical. There are some subtle little changes. It's around role-based access control, and the way you may provision networking might be slightly different. But fundamentally, the same skills are used, and the same processes, the same procedures, the same security policies can all be leveraged across different public clouds. And that is, that's unique, to be perfectly frank, from a VMware perspective. It's a unique thing that we're able to offer customers.
Great. Thank you very much, Martin. And that leads us to our second discussion point, which is a continuation, I would say, of this conversation, where we talk about how you can drive consistency across many different clouds for both resiliency and operational efficiency. And from our research, these are the top 5 capabilities that customers are investing in. And these are customers who are leaning more towards public cloud, and they are really trying to push the boundaries in terms of their cloud usage. These are the top 5 technology areas or capabilities that they are investing in. And the first one is, of course, security and digital trust. And I think both you, Paul, and Martin, you have mentioned it as, of course, one of the key concerns when moving into the cloud and also when operating in the cloud. Because how do you create this end-to-end security and governance across different clouds and your own environment? That is a key challenge. But also, how do you make sure that you're not misconfiguring the cloud services that you're using? Because a lot of the security breaches that we see in the cloud are actually misconfigurations. So there are some challenges around cloud security and digital trust, but that is also where organizations are putting their focus. So because they understand that if they want to build this new digital platform that helps them to be more resilient, but also innovative at the same time, it needs to be a trusted and secure platform, because otherwise it will not be adopted and will not be successful. And then the second aspect here is also that access to integrated real-time data has really come to the forefront as we've been working through 2020, because customer behavior has been changing sometimes overnight as countries have been going into lockdowns with very short notice. And organizations had to react to it, or supply chains have been disrupted, from one day to the next almost in some industries. And again, organizations had to react to it. So having access to integrated real-time data is, again, one of the key capabilities and one of the key reasons for going to the cloud and really trying to build these capabilities in the cloud. And then the next 2 are really around adoption of multi-cloud services. So being able to manage across many different cloud services and do that in as unified a way as possible. And also investing into automation and orchestration technologies, because when you're moving to the cloud and we are talking about cloud scale, then we are reaching the limits of what you can do in just manual processes. And that's why we see a huge interest in automation and orchestration technologies, both to scale up, but also to scale down if necessary, as we've seen throughout the last year. And then the last point, the number 5 capability, this is actually out of a list of 10. So these are the top 5 out of 10, is investments in programmable infrastructure, because organizations are seeing that they also need to upgrade and modernize their on-prem environments, so that it helps them to build cloud capabilities that they then can use in the public cloud, but also so that it's easier for them to connect both their on-prem environments and the public cloud services and drive a greater flexibility across both of these environments. And Martin, I would like to come back to you and also see, what is your view? How are you helping customers to create this end-to-end consistency?
Yeah, so thanks, Carla. Consistency is key, absolutely, without question. I think we see a lot of our customers at VMware wanting to maintain that consistent platform that they've been running in their own data centers for, in some cases, decades. They're familiar with it, they're happy with it, they know what the performance is like, but they want as well that some of the flexibility and some of that scalability you mentioned around public cloud, that ability to grow big when they need to and contract when they need to. So whether you're doing that at an application level or at an infrastructure level, the aim is that we can help you do that. So from an infrastructure level, to give you an example, we see customers extending their own data centers into services like VMware Cloud and AWS. They may take a pool of hosts, let's say 8 hosts, running applications in public cloud, running some of those same applications on-prem for resiliency purposes, but then they can expand. So at certain times of the year, depending on how their business operates, they can expand and add additional hosts, deploy additional applications for a short period of time. And then they can contract those in. So maybe they're contracted to run those 8 hosts all year, and they're using reserved instances, so they're getting maximum benefits from a discount perspective. But then they're running on-demand instances to burst into for short periods of time. And that gives them a good economic balance of consumption from a public cloud perspective. But that consistency, that hybridity, if you like, the control that you get from being able to move workloads from on-premise to public cloud and vice versa is key. And there is another element to this as well, and that's cloud exit, which is something no one in the public cloud trade really wants to talk about. How do you move workloads out of public cloud if you need to, whether it's a commercial reason, a technical reason, whether you're being mandated by, from a compliance perspective to take a different approach, or you just want to leverage a new and exciting service that's in another public cloud, and you think that's going to be a really key element and a differentiator for your business. But that ability to move those workloads in and out of public cloud, again, is a key differentiator. Cloud exit strategies are typically should be thought of and considered as part of a cloud migration plan. You shouldn't be planning on how you get your applications into public cloud if you're not planning on how you could get them out should you need to. And getting them out, as we all know, it's the Hotel California story, is really challenging. And the public cloud vendors, of course, don't really want to talk about how you exit their particular cloud platform. So that consistency, that choice, and we can talk about lock-in all day. There's good lock-in, there's bad lock-in. VMware provides lock-in or gives you lock-in, just like a public cloud provider does. We can talk about that and have that conversation all day. But there is still an element of flexibility of choice when you can bring those workloads back to your data center from a control perspective.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned exit, because that's usually not the first topic of conversation, but it's certainly a very important aspect of the strategy. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And most regulators are now mandating cloud exit plans as part of their regulatory compliance. And I'm even seeing some venture capitalists who won't invest in companies, won't put money into companies without that level of planning to give them the flexibility and control to get out of public cloud. And there are other ways of doing it. VMware is not the only way of doing it. You can abstract away Terraform, Ansible, and build, effectively abstract away to the APIs of public cloud. But then you're working with the lowest common denominator, and that can be challenging from the point of view of building really interesting applications.
Right. Okay, thank you very much, Martin. And I would like to get your view as well, Paul, on how to drive consistency across different clouds.
Yeah, Carlo, there was a point that you made just earlier. It's often a question that we lead with to get the customer to think about, multi-cloud as something more than just a technical solution. And it's about thinking about, and asking the customer, how are you going to drive an effective data governance policy? How are you going to drive an effective security posture across multi-cloud, which drags their thinking into the right area, I think, and stops you thinking about the tools as a starting point. But back to the point really here, whether the direction of travel is a VMware-based sort of, or it could be VMC-based, or it could be native, hosted services. I think the first step really in this scenario is to center around a single consistent cloud organization. So don't let the cottage industry sort of develop that will manage cloud and deliver cloud capability to AWS, Azure, Google, whoever in an inconsistent way. I think you've got to build an organization that will manage it and simplify and harmonize the way that cloud is used and presented back to the consumers. So it's about sort of having a single organization, but still keeping the specialist skills in towers that, but having them work collaboratively as a group to provide common ways of doing things. But just to be clear, you can try and sort of neutralize the nuances of dealing with the different clouds, but you want consistency, but not to the point of paralysis. You want to sort of simplify things and bring consistency where it makes sense, And we often start with a multi-cloud assessment with a customer just to understand their current ways of working, the different stages of maturity that they are at in the different sort of cloud silos that they probably have, and look at the existing approaches and tool set that they're using. And tools are important. I'll talk about tools in a little bit more in a second, but really it's about first shifting from that 3 organizations dealing with different clouds to with layers of duplication, and moving to a single sort of cloud organization with a common goal. And then it's really about, as a point that I made earlier, it's about taking all that incredibly useful advice coming from the hyperscalers in ways of working, best practice, etc., and harmonizing it. And almost sort of building a consistent model across all the clouds that you're using towards things like landing zones, the tools that you're going to use, cost management. Let's not deal with 4 and 5 different cost management tools that are unique to the different cloud provider. Let's do it in a very consistent way, and let's feed back to the business in a very consistent way about spend control, etc., etc. And I think the other thing you have to think about is, thinking about a very consistent way of managing data. So it fundamentally does come back to tools as well. About when you're thinking about the service that you're trying to provide, tools become important because you're trying to drive a common tool set. And this is where you do need to focus on, when does a third-party tool set make more sense than some of the native services that you will blindly probably implement that won't make sense in a multi-cloud context. So, even just thinking about things like load balancers, security, web firewalls, etc., you could easily be driven to think, I'll just use native, and that's the cheapest way to do it. It's the one that makes most sense. But if you think about sort of providing a consistent way of providing that capability across all of the clouds, and look at third-party solutions, maybe F5 for load balancing and web access, across all of the 3 cloud providers. Think about companies like NetApp and what they've done around cloud volumes, and by no means are NetApp exclusive in that area. Martin's spoken about some of the tools that VMware provides that can provide a single control plane as well. But think about common security tools, provisioning. See a lot of customers looking at Terraform and using Terraform in a consistent way in the developer space, and that then extending through into a consistent way of provisioning into the public cloud, and thinking about things like Vault as well as a single way of doing secrets management, not having multiple ways of doing secrets management as well. So for me, it's really about sort of always focusing on enabling the consumer. It's a really important point. When you're building your cloud center of excellence, is bringing all the right stakeholders into it, but being focused on the customer experience, the consumer experience, and building that into the way that you're sort of developing and evolving. And think about not just providing a cloud center of excellence, but a center of enablement. You're on this journey, it's constantly evolving, it's constantly changing. So doing some things that help the business areas get on board. One of the things we do with one of the big financial customers just now is paired programming, where as we're building the Centre of Excellence, we're actually then going out and working with the individual business units and showing them this is the way you solve that business problem you've got with this technology. So almost getting them really used to the technology, understanding how to stay within the guardrails and how they can still be successful as a provider within that business. So that's the way I think about it, is think about the consumer, think about the user, and just think about trying to provide them a consistent experience is a great way to think about it. Right.
Yeah. I think the Center of Excellence or Center of Enablement, as you call it, is also they need to evangelize the business of all the benefits, because oftentimes the business users are not even aware of all the benefits that they could get from the cloud, right? So I think being the evangelists of the cloud is also one of the key functions of this Cloud Center of Excellence. Great. Thank you very much, Paul, also for your inputs. And that leads us to the third topic, where we're looking a little bit into the future. So what's next? And how can you optimize your cloud operations for cloud-native application development and application modernization? And these are really two sides of the same coin. On the one hand side, we need to bring legacy, or I shouldn't call them legacy, but they are really business critical applications and on this modernization journey. And then on the other hand, we see this huge explosion of cloud native applications. And ideally, we would like to run them on the same platform, on this cloud-based or cloud-enabled platform. So that our IT is not breaking into two parts, basically. And what we've seen is that at the moment, around 14% of business critical applications are running fully on the public cloud. Another 30% are running in a hybrid cloud model. But then there's still more than 50% of applications that could potentially be modernized and could potentially benefit from moving to a cloud platform. And I mean, some of them will probably never go on this journey. They need to be retired or replaced by a new cloud native application. But there's still a huge pool of applications that at least need to be assessed and analyzed to see if they are ready for modernization and if they could benefit from moving to the cloud. So this is almost going back to this point about being evangelists or trying to see the potential that the cloud can bring to the organization and then also to the various applications that support the business. But what I also find staggering actually is that one of the predictions that we have come out with just recently is that by 2024, net new production grade cloud native applications will increase to 70% of all applications that are going to be in your environment by 2024. And that is up from just 10% in 2020. So that's a huge acceleration. So if you're looking at your application estate today and you find that we have a few cloud native applications, but they are, proof of concepts or they are relatively small, then in the next just 3 years, you will see that they will actually become the majority of applications. And that, of course, has some implications for the infrastructure that you need to put in place and how you manage these multi-cloud environments that we've been talking about. And just to give you an idea on how organizations are thinking about modernizing their business critical applications with the use of cloud, then we see that a lot of the mission critical applications, they typically start out in a lift and shift onto an infrastructure as a service. And then the non-mission critical applications that are more internally focused workloads, they tend to move to software as a service. And I showed you earlier that in the UK, 72% of organizations will either spend the same or more on software as a service applications as well. And then we see that digital applications and services and newly developed applications and services are typically now being developed in this cloud native environment. So using containers, using microservices, using functions, and using all the great services that the cloud providers are making available. I think you mentioned the Cloud Vision earlier as one of them, one of the examples, but there are hundreds of these services available out there. So this is how you could potentially structure your application landscape in order to find out, what is the best cloud or migration path for various classes of applications. But for me, this whole digital transformation or digital modernization exercise really starts with the applications and providing these paths forward for the different classes of applications that you're running. And Paul, I would like to also get your view on what you're doing with your customers around this topic.
Yeah, so listen, we spoke earlier that if you think as part of that cloud operations that a multi-cloud COE is required, then going about that, it makes sense that is a multi-stakeholder initiative. It's not just an IT initiative. And that's really important where you're bringing in the developer, the business lines, along with IT operations and shaping that centre of excellence so that it can cope with, the normal IaaS services, the PaaS services, as well as all of the more cloud native sort of technologies. So really, to that end, building that capability should really not be done in isolation. And then, if you do follow that path, you're going to find out that the business want to use things like BigQuery. They want to use serverless functions. We've seen some great examples of that in some of our customers where they're driving real cost savings by using serverless rather than standing up, capability. But the rest of the sort of container landscape as well is what you will find out, and you'll hear from the consumer. That's what they want, and that's the way they want to build stuff, and that's the service they want supported. So this really means you're going to end up looking like these provisioning tools that are very developer friendly, and we've mentioned some of them earlier, and Martin's mentioned the whole sort of Tanzu centric portfolio as well that is just as relevant in this space. You're going to end up dealing with a lot of the developer CI/CD tools as well. So we see lots of organizations where they're trying to tackle this as just a sort of let's deal with the sort of the multi-cloud problem in isolation. But the real way of getting success here is connecting that to the back end, and where these applications are coming from and where the demand is coming from. So whether you want to call it connecting it end to end or back of house to front of house, you're going to end up building a capability to cater for cloud native as well as anything else. But the point that you touched on earlier, app modernization, it remains a challenge for a lot of customers. They've tackled the low-hanging fruit. They've built new applications in the public cloud, but dealing with the traditional estate is something I think where most customers are not making progress as quickly as they thought. And a lot of them are way behind where they thought they would be about migrating their existing workloads. And we believe it's really important to have a methodology of defining the modernization process for the applications that exist today. We speak to many customers where the CIO is saying, if I ask my AWS guys where I should put this workload, it's going to go in AWS. If I ask the Azure guys, they say it should definitely go in Azure. So you're getting that sort of very partisan-based views coming forward. So the example I have on the screen here is a case study that we did with Kellogg's, where we've developed a piece of IP which focuses and centers around thinking about the application and the needs of the business owner, rather than just looking at cloud migration from a technology sort of perspective with quite a narrow field of view, really. So what this piece of IP really does is we have the customer drive the questionnaire. It's almost a questionnaire bank that they input to, which drives the outcome, and almost sort of with business inputs, with strategic inputs, with cost inputs, you end up with the applications being fated, but not by me saying this is the right way for you to do it based on what I know as a partner trying to help you. It's based on your own data and providing that sort of empirical evidence and the business case on an app-by-app basis. So this is what we did at Kellogg's, to great effect. It was one of our very first engagements with Kellogg's, which was great, to see us sort of have a relevance and sort of have a story that they could recognise. And I was really hoping that the folks from Kellogg's were going to join us at this event today to, live to talk about it, but it's not possible. But what we did manage to do was record Kellogg's perspective on some of this. So if you could show the video, we'll hear what Kellogg's had to say about their experience of dealing with this type of transformation.
Thank you, Paul.
Kellogg's, as an organisation, has a cloud-first strategy. So we're looking to move as many of applications as we can out to the cloud. We took the opportunity for Windows end of life, so 2008, going end of life in January 2020, as an opportunity to really validate what type of applications we have out there and what the strategy should be for all of those.
We were really looking for two key things. One was looking at opportunities to exploit cloud technology. So against our current infrastructure, how could we move applications and infrastructure to the cloud? and at a more primary level, what and how could we move applications and infrastructure that are currently hosted on 2008 to a secure, supported infrastructure?
The challenges we provided to Computacenter were very in-depth and quite broad. We gave them an opportunity to show what they were capable of. They approached it in a really, really professional way. They've delved into so many different areas that we wouldn't have been able to do in-house by ourselves. And they've provided us with a fantastic piece of work that we can use for the future as well. So when we go into Windows 2012 end of life, we'll be working on the same premises that we've done this time round.
From our perspective, the thing that Computacenter brought to the table to help address the challenges was that, firstly, flexibility. So although you're able to bring to the table a process and a methodology and a skill set, whilst we were doing that first phase of discovery, is actually being able to adapt and flex to the structures within Kellogg's, to the competing demands within Kellogg's, and rather than having a completely robust, rigid process, being able to flex around what we were able to deliver and sustain. And I think for us that was essential and contributed a lot to the success that we were able to deliver.
The piece of work that's come out has allowed us to look at our applications in a different way. We've got a whole lot of data that we didn't have before, so we can use that within our CMDB and baselines. And we can build a strategic view as opposed to an independent application view, which is really important for us.
So the benefits for Kellogg's are very much around, really split across two phases. One is from a tactical perspective, so what are the short-term quick wins that we have, and there the work that Computacenter done have helped us to really highlight where are those opportunities from a quick wins perspective, and in particular what actions should we progress as a priority. And then the second big benefit is, if you like, helping to drive the strategic thinking and the strategic approach for some of those longer term benefits.
The work that Computacenter have completed has given us a few different ideas and made us think more broadly than we did beforehand. So we've taken the expertise that they've had to deliver it in different fields and just challenge our thinking. So, you know, we're a small organisation, and using Computacenter has helped us open our minds, open the way we think about cloud first strategies, other options, and it's helped us to develop our thinking for the future.
Okay, great. That was a great example. Thank you very much for sharing, Paul.
Just one thing I should add there. You know, the customer was going to move some workloads to the public cloud. That when we did a level of investigation, we stopped them. It just wouldn't have made sense. That the application would no longer have worked. So we saved Pringles becoming a national shortage, which I think is a great story in itself.
Yeah, that would be not a good situation to be in. Great, thank you, Paul. And Martin, I would also like to get your views on taking a point of departure in the cloud journey on the applications and how to future-proof and modernize the application environment.
Yeah, so how do you future-proof is, you know, always going to be an interesting conversation with any organization, but I think I see a few things happening. You know, from a public cloud perspective, we are seeing some opening up of their standards. So, you know, in the past, we've had very proprietary systems. Now they're moving more towards maybe allowing some services to run on other public clouds, open telemetry, and things like that. Things that allow a little bit of an easier journey, if you like, for customers who want to consume multiple clouds. But I think, you know, from my perspective, and putting my VMware hat on, you mentioned earlier on, Carla, around running VMs next to containers, running next to functions or serverless. And that's really what VMware is aiming to offer all of our customers, that ability to run all of these things next to each other. And again, virtual machines are not going anywhere. Yes, new applications might be built in containers, and some will be built on serverless, some will be built in PaaS solutions. But the virtual machines, the IaaS isn't going anywhere. So it is key that we can have a platform that can maintain in a consistent way all of these different things, and that's really VMware's strategy around this. So, for example, Kubernetes, we've invested hugely in Kubernetes. It's a core part of our Tanzu portfolio, our ability to run a consistent Kubernetes platform anywhere, whether it's in your data center, whether it's at VMware on Azure, or whether it's in native Azure. That's where we're going with our portfolio. And the management and operational elements as well, bringing those under a single holistic umbrella to keep things as consistent and simple as possible, but consistent and also allowing you to innovate. And that's key. Having consistency is great, but you have to move forward. Being able to innovate with native cloud services is key for a lot of developers, and being able to do that in a completely integrated way is really the VMware strategy.
Yeah, I think that's one of the balances, and I think, Paul, you mentioned it as well, is you need to standardize, but you shouldn't paralyze, right? And that's the balance, I think, that everyone tries to strike.
Yes.
Great. So that brings me to our recommendations. So start your cloud journey from the application requirements, because they are really defining what you can do and where you can go in the cloud. Prepare for multi-cloud complexity, because even though there are some very significant benefits to using multiple cloud providers, you will also encounter operational complexity on this journey. So be prepared for that. And drive operational efficiency across your cloud landscape. And that is one of the key problems that, of course, has been exacerbated through the pandemic, that everything we do needs to be as efficiently as possible at the moment and moving forwards as well. So with that, I think we have a few minutes for Q&A. And so one question for you, Paul, is how are you enabling the delivery teams in Computacenter to consult around multi-cloud versus building a capability around individual hyperscalers?
Yeah, it's a good question, because it almost gives a little bit of a clue of how to do it internally within a customer's own environment. So I have three solution leaders who work into me that look after the three main hyperscalers, and a fourth looks after the VMware-based cloud technologies as well. And fundamentally, we drive them to collaborate consistently on looking at ways of working, best practice, leverage what's going on within the teams, but not stifling it. And one of the things that we've been doing is cross-training people as well. So we've recruited people who have extensive market experience around AWS, and then we retrain them in GCP so that they know how things work across both clouds. And in a consulting context, something that really helps is when we put people in front of a customer where they understand how to achieve the same outcome across all three public cloud providers that they're working with maybe. It gives us a value beyond, just being sort of really deep in one area. So it's something we're always watching. We're always sort of trying to train people, and it's just about consistent communication and reviewing and revising policies.
Great. Thank you, Paul. And I think it's good advice also for the internal cloud teams to work in a similar fashion. And Martin, one question has come in for you as well. So what is the strongest use case for running VMware on the public cloud?
So I think the strongest use case is in low risk, high velocity migration to public cloud, where you have to maybe evacuate a data center, or you need to reduce the data center footprint dramatically in a very quick time scale. And a customer is already aligned with Microsoft or AWS or Google. They're able to rapidly move those workloads out of their data center into the public cloud, sitting on exactly the same or close to exactly the same platform in public cloud. And that consistency, that simple, including live migration and consistent networking, not having to change IP addresses, not having to reformat or refactor applications in any way, simple rehosting from one VMware platform to another. And if it's a priority for a customer, they can do that through live migration as well. That's really one of the key use cases we're seeing at the moment.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for your time today and for your very valuable insights that you've shared. I hope our listeners have gotten a lot of inputs and a lot of food for thought. And please feel free to reach out to us if you want to do any follow-ups or deep dive into any aspects that we have discussed today. So thank you very much to Paul and Martin, and thank you very much for everyone attending the webinar. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Carla. Thanks, Paul. Great discussion.